I'm going to quickly explain the Osmose basic functions without trying to see what's going on the screen. If we start at the back of the Osmose, what kind of inputs and outputs we have? We have a power switch to the far left. Then comes the DC power input. Then comes the master out, and there are 1/4 inch jacks that are stacked one above the other. Left is the top one, right is the bottom one. They are balanced. Then comes 2 pedal jacks. They are also 1/4 inch jacks. Then comes the USB input, and then we have MIDI, like good old DIN MIDI, in and out. Moving on to the actual front of the Osmose, we have sort of to the right a little bit, there is a master volume knob. And then comes a row with rubberized buttons. The first rubberized button is smaller than the other 4, and that first one is about changing the engine of the Osmose. It affects how MIDI is controlling the Osmose. It affects the MPE settings, etc. I'm not going to go into that one. We're just going to focus on the other ones. The rest of the 4 ones is the presets, the synth, the sensitivity, and the playing. Now, the presets is where you change presets. The synth is where you go into changing macros. The sensitivity is where you can change curves on how the keys react to your touch. And the playing, it just, you can choose a little bit how the glide and things like that works. I'm going to only focus on the presets and the synth, the first 2. And when I say push the presets button, I mean on this row, it is the first big button. It's not the first button, which is the small rubberized button. It's the second, which is a little bit wider. And then the second of those is the synth button. So it's like presets and synth. Those 2 are next to each other, and I'm going to switch between those 2 for either changing presets or changing the macros. Then comes the screen, and the screen has 2 knobs to the left. Those knobs are typically used to go in menus sideways on the screen. And along the bottom of the screen, there are 4 knobs, and those are macro knobs, but they're also used in other menus on the screen in other situations. I'm mostly going to use them for the macro controls. I will show one thing in presets as well. If we continue below the screen, we have out to the left first a slider for pitch, and then we have a slider for modulation control. The modulation is always tied to one of the macros. So each sound has 6 macros, and the modulation will always be tied to one of them. Which one depends on the sound. It's not fixed. Then comes a group of rubberized buttons. There's 4 of them, and it's 2 pairs. The top 2 is stepping presets, left and right. So you're stepping the next preset to the right, the previous preset to the left. And below that we have octave buttons, and the octave is, there's 5 different octaves, and we start in the middle. We can go 2 octaves down, or we can go 2 octaves up. Okay, so going back to presets. The preset button is then above the screen. It is the first of the big buttons. We're going to ignore the small button. So we're in preset mode. We've pressed down the preset button above the screen, and now we're going to change presets. So we're first going to step presets using the preset stepper, which is below the screen directly to the right. So we go from the screen, there's the 2 rubberized buttons below the screen. And we can step sideways on those, so we have step preset by preset, etc. And this steps 1 at a time. It's a little bit slow to pick up the next preset. It takes a little bit of time to load, so it's a little bit annoying, but it is what it is. The preset can also go backwards, so all the presets are organized from A to Z, and if you go backwards from A, it actually goes back to Z, so you kind of keep just scrolling through all of them. There is another way of more quickly stepping presets and then not actually listening to the preset while you do it. So if we are in preset mode, the rightmost knob on the screen, below the screen, is quickly changing the preset. It goes through them. Here, though, we have a problem because this is not a knob that has indents. You don't feel when the knob is going. So you really have to see the screen where you're going. But if you just want to like jump in somewhere random, you can twiddle the knob many times, and there are many sounds. And then you push the knob down to jump to a sound. And then you can start going sideways with the preset buttons below again from that point on. But obviously this is horrible in terms of reproducibility, trying to figure out where you were, which sound you had, etc. So it's just, there is no good way of quickly finding a sound in the middle of everything that would be useful if you can't see what the screen is doing. So let's talk macros. Once we have found a sound that we want to use, we can then go into macros. And if we remember, then above the screen, we have 4 rubberized buttons that are wider, and then there's a tiny little one out to the left. We're going to ignore the tiny one. The first of the rubberized buttons above the screen is the presets, and the second one goes into synth, or that's where we have the macros. So we select the sound when we are on the presets button, and then we click the second button to go into synth mode. When we're in synth mode, then the 4 knobs at the bottom of the screen becomes macro knobs. So if we just play, we can change the sound with those 4. It's not defined which one has what macro. It can be anything. In this case, it's like a detune, a cutoff, a resonance, and an attack. And that differs from sound to sound. You never really know what you get. But each sound has 6 macros, and we only have 4 knobs. And to step between those, we can use the button the knob that is on the left of the screen. So on the left, we have 2 knobs, and it's the bottom left knob on the screen that we want to reach for. This goes sideways. So if we imagine that we go fully counterclockwise on that knob, then we will see the first 4 macros. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 at the bottom knobs. And if we go 2 steps to the right on that knob, then we are seeing macro 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we can effectively go 2 steps to the left, 2 steps to the right, and that will either give us then 1, 2, 3, 4, or 3, 4, 5, 6 on the macro control below the screen. And that's how you reach the last two macros for each. And then remember, the modulation wheel always controls one of the macros. Which one is not defined. It depends on the sound. You just have to play around and figure out which one does which one.